over the past few weeks, and actually over the past few months, and actually for some time, I've had lots of little weird ideas in my head, and they've been coming out in different presentations and so on. And it's becoming clear to me that that either early Christianity in Britain has been completely over exaggerated, and there weren't all these saints, and there weren't all these monasteries, and there weren't all these churches, or the evidence for these early monks and these early monasteries in most cases have been completely eradicated by the Normans and replaced. And I've used the words by the anti-religious British orders from France, because it seems that most of the sense of pre-Norman Christianity seems to have been wiped out. Now, Michelle and I have been talking about this, and we've been going back and forth. And one thing is clear, and this is a really unusual thing. We were looking at Llandovery yesterday, because Llandovery is in West Wales, for those that don't know, in Cumbria. Llandovery in West Wales has a really nice castle there, and Llandovery itself is associated nearby with an abbey known as Tally Abbey. Now, it's very strange. An obscure French religious order came over, invited by the princes of Cymru, the princes of Wales, to establish a religious order and a monastery at Tally, right? And I thought, that's really, really strange. Why would a semi or an independent Wales be inviting French religious orders over to Wales? Where were all the monastic orders that we were supposed to have had? And actually, the Welsh princes are inviting these French orders over as well. So the big question I've got today is this statement fact or fiction? Or is there any grounding for what that statement on the screen? Or do we go with my other theory, that maybe we weren't as massively a religious country as history tells us? So we're not going to answer that question tonight. But one thing I aim to do is give you the tools and information to maybe answer that question. Was Christianity as big as the history books tell us? If it was as big as the history books tell us before the Normans, then it must be that Norman civilization eradicated an ethnic cleansing of early Christianity across Britain. So this is quite a massive subject, and we're going to get the information in our minds, and this is what I'm aiming to do. Now, one thing that I do on a Wednesday between 1:30 and 2:30 is look at the Romans, and I just sit down for an hour and I just give my wisdom about the Romans. I go anywhere. I look at the Romans in Syria, I look at the Romans in Scotland, I look at the Romans in Cornwall. You've missed all the best bit, Pete. I look at the Romans in Wales. I look at who the Romans were. I look at my new book. I look at all these things. But one thing that keeps coming up over and over and over again is what exactly happened in the later years of Roman Britain. And the answer is, it's very confusing. One minute, historians will tell us that Roman civilization collapsed, and then the next minute you see archaeological evidence, as we've seen with the other lectures, that we can find archaeological evidence of a continuance beyond the 400s, the 500s, into that period of King Arthur. That's the last time we'll mention King Arthur today. So, in many ways, hopefully we'll have already scratched the surface of some of the things that we're going to look at today. And we are going to repeat one or two things, but there's lots of material that's completely new. And then in 2 weeks' time, we will move this on a lot further forward in our search for more information about the archaeology of Britain. As I said, a bit of foreign archaeology, a bit of British archaeology, and that's where we're going. So, a site that's already familiar to us, and it will already be familiar to us, is a site near Cardiff. And we've already sort of touched upon a location known as Landock. But what I focused on more is the people. I didn't really focus on the words religion. And at that moment, I've got Michelle in my ear as we had a conversation earlier on. And she said, hang on a minute. Why are you talking about religion all the time? And I said, they're not talking about religion all the time. And she said, yeah, you're talking about the fact that they must have had religion, these people. And I say, well, that's what we're always told. And that's a big thing, isn't it? And Andy knows that when archaeologists can't really come up with an answer, we chuck in religion every single time. And Michelle said, why do you have to have religion all the time? And I said, I know, it's not what I believe, it's what most of the history books tell us. This is where they go, you know? And that's an interesting thing again. That's another direction, that's another tangent. Did all these people... Oh, David's just about to join us, so we can all clap. That's a bit of a surprise. David joining us today. Oh, I tell you what, that. David, you're in the middle of something really important now today. I'm gonna have to give you a little bit of a recap, David. But where have you been, David? We haven't seen you for 5 years.
No, I know. I'm sorry about that.
You know, Drina's had 5 children since.
Oh yeah. Nothing to do with me.
3 of them are mine. But anyway, and 2 are Idris's. Right, David, what we were looking at is we're trying to see whether early Christianity in Britain is as big as the historians tell us. And the other question is, did lots of people have religion? You know, why do archaeologists talk about religion all the time? And that's where we were talking about. And one thing that we're always told is that everyone in history has always got religion. Always. It's a definite. But I tell you what, there are 8 of us today, and how many of us actually go to church, and how many of us are religious? And we're thinking, well, it's a bit of a weird secular state that we live in, right? But even in Islamic states, there's people who don't follow the Quran, you know. And the point is that we always talk about religion, right? But this is specifically about religion today. But we've always got to have an eye on the ball. We can't always think that everyone, down to the last sheep, is actually a Christian within this world that we're talking about. So be very wary of lots of things, and always question. So that's the site that we're going to look at near Cardiff Landock, and this is a really, really nice image, and this is an image of the Roman site, which once existed at Landock. I remember telling you the other week, I remember saying that this site had been destroyed and they had developed upon it, and there's new flats there, and I told you about links with another site at Dinas Powys, and I told you about burials, and I told you about linking all the DNA with the site at Dinas Powys with this site, and then the large burial ground nearby at Landock. And But one thing I didn't really look at and touch upon was actually Christianity much. And this is the thing. This is the context. The context is near here. Basically, a stone's throw. Actually, a stone's throw from here was a cemetery, but the stone's throw would hit the church. So so this place at Landock itself, when they look at this place at Landock, they always say that this site must have been linked to a Christian community. It must have been a Christian community. It had to have been a Christian community. And you know what? I'm actually as guilty as the next man or woman who would say that the only religion that you could practice in Roman Britain at this stage, into around the year 400 and beyond, was Christianity. That's if you practiced a religion. So, and everything that you see about this period, it's about Christianity. It's always about Christianity. You know, you look at the anything to do with Ireland and Lindisfarne and Saint Cuthbert, and then you got Saint David and all these wonderful saints around there. We're obviously all so pious, and we're all religious, and we're supporting religious communities. But the very facts is that we don't have much evidence for Christianity at this time. You know, when we do find sites that are associated with this period, we're more interested in the pottery and the human remains and the buildings than the Christianity, because there's not a lot of it. You know, there's a site which is quite some distance away in a place called KARL-JAMES, and archaeologists have excavated there, and they said obviously this is definite that the temple building here, that there's an apsidal bit of a place being put onto it. It's obvious, it's definite that this must have been a Christian church, and associated with Tathan at the Saint Tathan at KARL-JAMES. But when nobody asks me the right questions, it's their own lookout, because I always say, look, you know, it's a temple site, right? And actually what I need to do, I'll just get this, it's out of context, so I'll just find this image a minute, and KARL-JAMES Roman temple, and you'll see what I mean. It's always best to question these things. Right, okay, Roman temple. Hang on, let's get an image of it, and I will show you exactly what I mean. Oh, there it is. Love it. Can't get any better than this. Right, let's just share this on the screen. And bingo. Oh, shouldn't Roger be with us tonight as well? Bloody hell. There's no Rog. God, I won't have to have a bath tonight, dirty Rog. So anyway, this is the this site itself is the temple in KARL-JAMES, and you know, the typical story is it looks like a Roman temple, and the city moved into a period of Christianity, and that thing there is apsidal. That, if I point to it, that is an apsidal bit, and hang on, I've got the blooming screen share thing on the screen. Hang on a minute, everything. Hang on, stop. Right, right. Okay, let's stop that. Let's something just come up on the screen. Right. So what we've got there? We've got an apsidal structure within the temple complex, and that is a sign that this is definitely a Christian site. But that's all the evidence we got to say it could be Christian. Nobody has actually told us that it is a Christian site. And this is the problem with all this, is that we're so obsessed with Christianity, and people must have been Christian, that it stops us trying to understand what is really going on. It really is. You know, it's always about religion in archaeology, but you've got to really start to question that. And this is a very specific juncture in where I want to take you, actually. And it's the same thing nearby as well, nearby Landock. I won't get the image up, but there's a church called St. Peter's Church, and I think Pete's been with me there as well. But there's a St. Peter's Church, a place known as Cog, and that church, they've always believed that the church was built by the Saxons, right? Because there's a herringbone used in the construction of the church. But then you get a more wiser archaeologist like me coming along, rewriting the history of the church and actually saying, you know, the herringbone stuff, it's actually above other masonry that's horizontal. And the herringbone was actually used to restore the church in the 1800s. But nobody actually sees this. Nobody actually questions these things. So it's always about questioning things in archaeology. And one of the biggest things in archaeology is to always think of archaeology as being about you and me. It's not always about finding churches and religion and things that go bump in the night. So with this site again, we're back to this. We see that there's a wonderful, we've mentioned this before. I know we've mentioned this before, and I remember saying that this itself is the Urbic cross. Right, there she is. Without the archaeologists around it, this is the Urbic cross. Now this is fascinating. That's actually a really good image, actually, better than the ones that I showed you when we actually looked at this a couple of weeks ago. And it's got the words Urbic written there. And I remember saying that this is actually made of 4 different bits of crosses. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 4 separate monuments actually, and it was lying on flat, and they chucked it all together, and people now believe that this is what this looked like. It never looked like this at all. And there's one important thing. I've taken you down an avenue, and I've said that lower carving there could be to do with the Roman villa, but I didn't once say that was Christian. I associated it with a Christian monument, but I didn't. And this is the thing, you see, it's all this assumption, and unfortunately it stifles and it stops us trying to understand history and what history and archaeology is really truly all about. Now, when I sat down today, I thought, right, how do I really put across what I'm trying to put across here? What am I trying to put across? And I actually thought, let's try and look at a few different sites, some familiar and some unfamiliar. I like doing anecdotal stories, as you know. Pete knows I like doing anecdotal stories, and my local column in the local newspaper has turned into anecdotes. But one thing I'd like to say is that the year was 1988, and there was a local archaeologist excavating at the back of Cadoxton Church. And if I'd have known Pete back then, I'm sure he'd have been over with a can of oil and he would have said hello. But anyway, we were excavating at the back of the church, and the guy excavating it was an archaeologist who's no longer with us, called Howard Thomas. And he said, the reason why we're excavating here is to find the early Christian church. I thought, yeah, brilliant. That's what we're going to find. It's associated with St. Caddoc. That's what we're going to find. Not this one in front of us, not the image in front of us, right? It's placed in Cadoxton, which is near Landock, right? Just giving you an anecdotal story. And so we were excavating down, and we went down I'm sure we went down a good metre and a bit, right? And he said we couldn't. We excavated in the chancel area, and he said I couldn't find any remains of the early church of St. Caddoc. There's nothing here. Can't find the early church, but it must have existed, because the early church would have been made out of timber, right? So because there's no evidence, it might prove that there was a church here, but it's rotted away. So because we haven't found anything, doesn't mean to say that there's not a church here. Right. Anyway, so I know that this is like the attitude with this is the typical attitude, yeah. And because we're told that all Christian churches, well, not all of them, most Christian churches in Wales have early origins. So like names like St. Iltyd, St. Canna, St. David, Saint Barak, all these wonderful saints, right? Chuck in Saint David as well, and we think therefore that there must be an early church underneath all these wonderful churches across Wales, and the same can be said about Cumbria as well. Across lots of churches across Cumbria as well, but the sad reality is who's writing the history, and that's the big question. Who is actually writing the history of all of this? Anyway, just quickly back to this other site, which is near this place at Cadoxton, where I was excavating with this archaeologist in the 1980s. It turns out that the earlier church of Cadoxton is probably somewhere else, but we'll look at that again. Anyway, so as we start thinking, we need to start realistically reappraising this whole period. That there's so much wrong about how we look at this period, and Christianity is one of them. It really, really, truly is. And the other thing as well is, what we're told is that there was paganism, and then in the Roman period, paganism was replaced by Christianity, and then the Viking, first of all, the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes and the Franks came over. And they were pagan, and they fought with us because we were Christian, and then they converted to Christianity, and then the Vikings come over, and then the Vikings are pagan and they're converted to Christianity, and then suddenly enough, all those strands of Christianity is actually eradicated by the Normans, right? They completely eradicate it, and all these other civilizations do not eradicate Christianity. So the Angles and the Saxons don't eradicate Christianity. In fact, there are around 250 foundations of Anglo-Saxon churches that we know of across Britain, mainly southern England, and Brixworth is one that we're going to actually look at today. And so the Anglo-Saxons didn't eradicate the earlier Christianity. They actually built churches themselves, and then the Vikings didn't eradicate the Christianity that they come across in the 800-900s, and they actually built churches themselves. And lots of evidence with the hogback tombs, for example, that we actually find in Cumbria as well. So we need to ask those questions: who is actually writing the history? And this is a really interesting point. Now, when me and Michelle were chatting about this today, and she said, what about the red books of Hirgest? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, in those books are the red books of Hirgest, which are stored in Oxford, which is written in the Old Welsh language. They don't allow people to look at that book. They don't allow people to look at it. And the questions are, why is there such a secret on the history of Britain? Why are there so many things that we seemingly don't seem to understand, and why is there a narrative that we all believe? And I tell you what, right, none of us go down the avenue today and say that they didn't believe in all this early Christian stuff, because we all did. We all believe in it, because we see some monuments here and there, but one thing is that we don't question it, which we should do. We mention Claire every week, so I'm going to mention her this week. Claire's into a period that she doesn't need to worry about religion and things that go bump in the night. She finds a tooth, a human tooth, in a 12-month excavation, and she's over the moon, right? But she can't interpret that as being anything to do with religion. The way she interprets that is it's to do with human beings and their development and their ability to be in somewhere. And I think religion is sometimes used to hide behind, because when we don't have information, we always seem to hide behind Christianity. For example, I believe that Jesus Christ existed, but I'm certainly not a Christian. I believe that Christianity was one of the most evil things to ever come onto this planet. That may insult a few people, but that's the way I feel. And in regards, when we look at the Normans and who they were, do you know what? on Saturday, I gave a talk to a pagan society online, right? And it was about my new book, The Romans in South Wales. And I remember doing this talk, and I realised something after this talk. Well, not after the talk, just before the end. And I actually told people what I realised. I said, you know what? In all the years, I've had people having a go at me for being a lover of the Romans. And that, you know, I dismiss anything other than the Romans in Britain, which is absolutely a complete lie. If you read my new book, you'll know that that is a complete lie. But one thing I've always gone along with, but the one thing that I used to go along with, I don't go along with it now, and I certainly haven't gone along with it for a few years. But I used to believe that the Romans were actually quite a bloodlusty people, you know. Until I started realising that there's not a single tangible piece of evidence of any hill fort being sieged by the Romans anywhere in Britain. All 5,000 forts. We've got no evidence of a single siege in the Roman period of any of these forts. And not even Maiden Castle, because that was sort of drummed up by Sir Mortimer Wheeler. And then you start to look at the Romans. And one thing that you can say about the Romans, right? And this is fact. One thing that you can say about the Romans is that they didn't eradicate the local religion, right? Aqua Saluri, for example, when we look at the amalgamation of a local god with a Roman godhead in regards to Bath, that's a Roman and a native god put together. They put them together, right? Which is amazing. And the Romans, the sense, do you know what I call it now? Is Pax Britain. It's not Pax Romana. The Romans learned as much from us as we learned from them. It was like a love of each other. It was like a great relationship of two couples that are learning from each other and surviving. That's what the Roman world was. And then we come to the Normans. If you know the history about the Normans, you will know the following. When the north of England resisted the Normans in the 1280s, not 1280s, in the 1080s, the harrying of the north, William I and then William II put to death tens of thousands of people in the north for resisting Norman rule. Tens of thousands. But we don't have any like that level of people being persecuted and executed in the Roman period. It's the Normans who we should blame for the destruction of our history. It's the Normans that we should blame for the eradication of our culture. And I'm not just talking about the likes of the kidding around I have with Cornwall and Cymru, Wales every week with me and Pete. I'm talking about Cumbria. I'm talking about the loss of identity in many places of Britain. And this was all at the hands of the Normans. And slowly but surely we see it. Now, one place that we're going to go to, which will be very, very familiar to Andy, and it's Lindisfarne. And I remember that quite some time ago, we looked at some new excavations at Lindisfarne in 2017, right? So that's relatively new because Andy's been with us since 1863. So we looked at a discovery in 2017, and that discovery in 2017 was actually at Lindisfarne, Holy Island. There she is, Northumberland, Lindisfarne. So what we then do is that we go to the discovery on Holy Island of Lindisfarne of a massively important discovery, right? And I know somebody's trying to send me messages through, but for some reason I can't read them on the screen. So look at that headline again. It says, "It is one of the most important discoveries from the early medieval period that has been made in Britain over recent decades." Now that is a massively important statement. And why is it important? Because they found a very early church there. An actual proper church. Not one that we're guessing could be a church. A proper, real, sexy church. A real, proper church. That's what we're talking about. And then we go and see the archaeological excavation images, right? Which we're gonna have a quick look at. Oh, and Michelle's just about to come in through the door. Okay, hang on a minute. I'll just open the door for. Hang on. Here we go. Here we go, my beautiful witch. Come on in. Do I get a cup of tea?
Hang on a minute, shouldn't you be getting me a cup of tea?
I'm teaching, darling.
I think with the hill forts attacked by the Romans, he's forgotten Burnswalk Hill in Scotland.
I had a bit of grief then. Right, so Lindisfarne, right. So I know me and Andy, we looked at this before, and this is the archaeology at Lindisfarne. And this was quite a revelation when they excavated this. But there's something very, very wrong in what I'm seeing, and I'm not going to say what that is yet. But let's read out a little bit of information about this. Let's just sort of see where my notes actually take me. So I'm just gonna get my stuff up on the screen. And this archaeological excavation, the remains of what may be the oldest Anglo-Saxon church in Northumberland. Now, that's the thing. They're giving it a tag already. They're saying it's an Anglo-Saxon church, right? Okay, fair enough. Why can't it be an earlier church? Do you know what I mean? Now, this is the thing. You see, we're doing what I'm trying to avoid. I'm saying, right, the early church, right, and I went directly into the Anglo-Saxon period. So what about the actual earlier stuff? And this is the really interesting question. So there's an excavation in 2017 by a Richard Carlton of Newcastle University, and has uncovered sandstone blocks that are around 3 feet in length. So these sandstone blocks are 3 feet in length. Foundations that measure more than 3 feet wide. What appears to be a high altar base and the division between the church's nave and chancel. Now, what's all that about? So, what is really interesting, right? And use the notes on the screen, right? So, all right then. So let's just see what these notes are. Right, here we go. Religious depictions of Christ on the cross develops at a stable rate. The early medieval period had less detail in the depictions, but later medieval showed that they had more meditation on their passion over time. Therefore, it could be argued that the early medieval period was not as religious as we believe. I agree. Also, theological arguments developed more in the later medieval period, not in the early medieval period. I agree. I completely agree with you, Jessica. And the one thing that is really interesting stuff, but the other thing as well is the early religion. That's the question. Is the early religion as like the religion as Christianity developed? And the answer is no. And Andy said about the what about Burnswalk Hill in Scotland as a hill fort attacked by the Romans? I think that's the one, is it not, Andy, where they found that the soil and the clay has been vitrified as if has been seen to a massive, intense level of heat? Is that the one, Andy?
I'm not so sure about that. It's where they found all the slingshot that had been used, and they realised that it had been under siege.
Right. That is a really interesting one, and whether that's real or not, Andy, and I'll go with it being real. That's the only example that there is.
It is, yeah. It is the only one I know of. But,
out of 5,000, Andy, that's not good going, is it?
No. They're practicing.
What was that trap train law? Is that what it was called?
What's that?
Trap rain law. That's in Scotland.
Oh, right, the hoard that they found.
Yeah.
The silver hoard. The religious silver hoard there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The massive religious silver hoard. What I'm not trying to do is say that there was no Christianity. What I'm trying to say is it the Christianity that we think it is? That's the question I'm asking here.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not dismissing early Christianity at all. What I'm trying to do is give us another interesting perspective here to actually look at all this. So what we do find is we have the chancel, we have the nave, and then we have the altar. Rather interesting. And then the entranceway could be of one of two places. The entrance, to me, it looks like it's over here, and you might find another entrance over here. However, with all that said, some of these blocks are colossal sized blocks. So you can see there's a person excavating there, and there's a person excavating there. Right, these blocks are several feet in length. Right, they're colossal blocks. And you start to think, this must have been from an earlier structure, because these look as some of the weirdest choice of building material I have ever seen associated with a church. These look extremely strange. And the other thing as well is this is another point that I've made time and time again. Early Christianity was about openness. Early Christianity was about inclusion. And I've said this before, because early Christianity, for example, when you do see early Christianity, you do see big open spaces like this one. Yeah? And what probably happened is that the altar may have been up against this back wall, because it looks like the chancel's been added later. Because what we usually say in archaeology, when I go to churches anywhere, I usually tell people that the chancel came first, and then the nave, and then you've got a tower, and then you put a porch on, right? But with the early church, something very, very different is going on. You actually find that the nave comes first. And why? You get a big open space. And why? The reason why you've got this big open space, if we want to draw and move this into a rectangle, is that early Christianity was very open. And what I mean by that, if you go into a modern church, what you usually see, you usually got the chancel, right? And what you then have, you've got an altar which is here, right? Or you've got a pulpit which is up here, right? And sermons are read out, and that is, as I've mentioned in the past, a sense of division, where the clergy are here and the common people are here. But in earlier Christianity, everybody was together in one space, because it was just one rectangular structure. And even as Christianity is developing, as this building's developing into the 800s, for example, we do believe the remains of this go back as early as the 600s. As they're adding the chancel onto this, in fact, an interesting thing is the altar is set against the back door, against the back wall. And what is key to understanding what earlier Christianity is about, and moving away from this in a few moments, is that the altar was not seen as a division between the people and the clergy. The altar then comes further to the front as a division much later on. Now, the one thing I'd like to say about this building is that it's clear to me that these big boulders, these big cut dressed stone, are so randomly put together that they must have been from another structure. And that is another really important point I want to make there. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to move on and just tell you a little bit from my notes. And then I'm going to have something to eat. So this church itself is on a vantage point, on a ridge. And it's also seen that this church may have actually been associated with a capital city, the royal family of the Northumbrians, and it dates from roughly the early 600s, probably changes by about 800-900s, and probably still stood until 1050. And strange enough, the church after that, not many years after, you get the Normans, and people stopped worshipping here. The church site was abandoned. Now that is an interesting point. Why is such an early religious site abandoned? Why does that happen? Why is that allowed to have happened? Big question then. Why do they allow that to happen? And then you've got the new religion of Norman Christianity saying that you can't use that church anymore. And interesting enough, if you do look at the image, there is something very, very interesting about it. Everything's at the same level. Yes, you could say, oh, the reason why everything's at the same level is that what they would have done is that, let's get really excited, they'd have laid timbers like this, and they'd have laid timbers like this, and what they would have then done, you'd have had like a crux frame here, and let's chuck a crux frame in here as well, and we'll chuck a crux frame in here as well. Basically, a crux frame is when you get two timbers from the same tree, and it's cut in half, it's halved, and you create a crux. It's not exactly like that, and that creates a crux frame structure, right? However, this looks to me like it's been leveled completely. It doesn't look right. It looks like somebody has said, right, we need to level this. We need to erase it from history. We don't want anything poking out out of the soil. Am I exaggerating? Am I making this up? Am I trying to prove some distorted theory? But the evidence tells us that this was an early Christian church. Forget the Anglo-Saxons, right? This was an early Christian church. Anglo-Saxons may have had influence. These stones have come from another building. That to me looks very obvious. The building stood until the 1050s, 1060s, and a few years later the Normans got into the area, and it's all been levelled. It's all gone. History's gone. It's been erased. Why? Why is this happening? It doesn't happen in any other religion, does it? It really doesn't. It really, really doesn't. Because what we've well, you could argue that Islam does it. You know, Islam wants to remove. In Islam, you only have one holy book. You don't have in a mosque, right? You're supposed to have one holy book, the holy book, right? It's supposed to be a new holy book every few years. They write a new one. It's the word of God. They write a new one. They get rid of all the old books, right? But the buildings of Islam, as long as it's same sect of Islam, it continues and so on. And that's what we see with the early Greek Orthodox Church. It just continues and continues. There's something very strange going on with Christianity in Britain. Something very, very strange. And I'm really struggling to put my finger on it. And I just wanted to look at this today. We'll use up this time positively. Just put a couple of ideas out there to try and understand where I'm going. And look at that. Doesn't that look absolutely perfect? It looks too perfect. It looks really too perfect to me. And I'm struggling with this. Archaeologists have dated this structure from the 600s to the 1000s. And can I shout something to Michelle? Michelle? Can you please put the oven on? There's 2 burgers in there. Sorry about that. We've got to think about food. Can I just ask one of you randomly, Margaret? What does this look odd, or am I just over exaggerating this?
It looks as if it's just been laid down in very neat rows quite recently. Do
you know what? I wanted to say that myself. I really, really did. I really, really did. And do you know what? This is not in my notes at all, right? Do you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that this has been very much with what you described. Maybe the church was somehow demolished, and they put all these stones to line out where the church was. But that was done a very, very long time ago. Do you know, Andy's been to many archaeological sites. We all have. And do you know when you go to archaeological sites, you get buildings laid out and it's all the same level, and there's like a remains of a Roman wall or a medieval castle or something, right? That's what this looks like to me. There's something very queer about this, and it's not right. It doesn't look right. It looks too perfect. It's something, but the radiocarbon dating evidence tells us. It tells us that this is dated from that period. But maybe they wanted to remember something. And this is an offering to remembering something. What was exactly going on? Is it, as I said, the early monastic orders were wiped from the face of Britain when the Normans came over here? Is that right or wrong? Is that fact, fiction? Andy?
If you looked at the aerial view of the kind of the plan view before, the construction of the main chapel room, on that top line there's an order to the construction halfway along, and then it changes.
Yes.
Whereas it's all the way along the bottom one, which would suggest, I mean, you don't build like that. That's ridiculous. Even with big blocks like that, you don't build like that. It wouldn't stay up. So it would go with what you're saying, that somebody's laid, demolition rubble, just the big blocks, laid them out in a way to mark it. And it's not square. I mean, if you look at the what would have been the east wall of the original building, it's nowhere near straight, and they wouldn't have built it that badly. So that's a box from the system, right? Yeah.
We go, look at that.
Yeah.
These are two linear square boxes. It doesn't. No. And do you know what, Andy? Right. You and I've been doing these classes for a long time. I've been doing archaeology for a long time, and so have you. It's only after years of thinking that you can actually come to these conclusions.
Yeah, agreed. Every little church I've ever seen, a very early one, a small little rectangular boxes, but not like that.
No.
Doesn't mean to say it's, that might be an early form of something else, but you're right. And the chancels definitely added on. So.
Yeah, this is the thing, you see, right? This is always the thing, right? Chancel first, nave second, right?
Yeah.
And when I was rewriting the history of St. Peter's Church at Cogan, in the Vale of Glamorgan, Peter knows it, St. Peter's Church. I said, you're not going to like what we found. You're not going to like it, right? And for about a year, they didn't use our work. And then they suddenly said, oh, we're going to use it. This makes sense. And what we said, exactly the same thing at St. Peter's Church in the Vale of Glamorgan, right? The church is a little bit older, right? Well, start again. Wrong word. The church is a little bit more newer. It's probably built sometime in about the 1100s, right? Or is it? Or is it much earlier? I think we argued that it was a lot earlier, right? But one thing that there was, the chancel came last. You had the nave first. A nave this form, a nave this size, and a chancel. The chancel is so badly... I tell you what, right? Let's stop talking about this St. Peter's Church. Let's actually just show you, right? Let's just show you this church, right? Let's just get in there and You'll see what I mean. St. Peter's Church, Cogan.
But the social use of the space fits with every known everyone I've ever visited. I've visited quite a few on the Isle of Man. They've got little kirks, as they call them, over there, and they're almost like the size of a garden shed, but they're just a space for like 10 people to get in. They don't have any extra bits on. It's only later did they add the extra bits and move the altar, or even put an altar in, because they don't think they even add an altar. So just the social use of the building just dictates a kind of chronological order to things.
I agree completely, Andy. I completely.
Oh, that's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
This is the herringbone. This is the herringbone, right? But
I see what you mean, though.
You see right. So you see what I mean. This is the chancel, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if I got any of the new images, right? But what happened? Right. Can you? This is.
Yeah. It's on top of that other bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can clearly see what and Roger's just joined us amazingly enough, just as we're having a break. What you can see is all of these are linear. This is all linear, right?
Yeah.
And this wall here, the chancel wall is so badly made with tiny blocks that the chancel must have come in later. And can you see that there? All this herringbone has been used directly on top of the linear stuff. So therefore, it's a complete misinterpretation. And if you look at the records that we looked at, by about 1830 odd, most of the church had collapsed.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's been patched up, and that's quite a good way to fill a hole.
Yes.
So.
And the point that I was trying to make, the point I was making, is this building here is exactly this. I've used this in our research. It is exactly the same type of stuff that you actually see at Lindisfarne.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Is that herringbone feature used on many old churches?
The herringbone level of construction is actually used on Roman buildings. You do see it on some Anglo-Saxon structures, but you don't see it on Anglo-Saxon structures directly on horizontal beds below.
No,
it doesn't work.
No,
I've never seen that before.
It doesn't take any load, so it's just a way of filling a hole.
Yeah, there you go. I want a little break in a minute, but if we look at that there, it's like this, and it's like this, and it's like that, and suddenly you've got all these lines of masonry. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not just decorative then, it's
just to patch up the church.
Yeah, it's filling a hole.
If there I was filling a hole there. Right, okay, so
there'll be the guy will have said, well, I can't do linear, but I can do herringbone. Oh, that'll do. Yeah.
That'll do. And actually, the strange thing is, the archaeologist John Ward, excavating on a big burial chamber near us called Tinkinswood, when he was excavating it, the linear walls that he was excavating, he couldn't work out where, if it continued. So what he used herringbone as a restorative measure, so future archaeologists in future generations could tell what the actual real archaeology is and what isn't. So herringbone is undoubtedly the material of choice to either indicate whether it's real or not.
Tell you what, I've just noticed on that picture, that bit we were talking about as being different on the top wall there, may well be the only original bit, because it's got the two-faced. On the main chapel.
There.
Yeah, it's got the two-faced walls with fill in between, which is how you would make a wall.
That's how you would make a wall.
Yeah.
That you would make a wall like this with an internal and external, right?
It's the only one.
Fill. Yeah, it's only
the other walls. You've got the locking bar across.
Yeah.
And if the next layer up had the locking bar across, but over the two horizontal ones, then that would give it a much firmer construction.
It would be strong. You're right. But
look at that, Peter.
Very unusual construction.
On the load-bearing gables, which you need, that is not there.
Mm.
No, but it is on the lower wall. Now, if you look at the lower wall, there you will see the cross pieces, which are actually
until
you get to the bottom right-hand corner, and it seems to stop.
Well, yes.
And that's not even keyed in, Pete. You need the gable keyed into the rest of the structure. So yeah, exactly. In other words, you've got so many building styles here. That's one building style. That's another building style. That's another building style. That's another. This is not making sense.
Actually, Pete's got a point. The two ends are the same. So, but
a bit of a hodgepodge.
The building blocks obviously are readily available according to the geology of the area again.
Right.
And if it's a sedimentary rock, which is easily to split. Right. Horizontally into horizontal slabs, that's probably what they were using, and that's probably relative to the geology of the area. I'm not sure what the geology of the
Pete, Pete, I completely agree. I completely agree with
sedimentary
you.
Rock.
I completely agree with you, but we don't have any form of construction here. We've got so many different whys and wherefores. But back to what we were saying,
they're just demonstration walls of what could have been.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, could go with that.
I'll go with that. Yes. Yeah, I'll go with that, and I will go with what we said earlier on about this doesn't look right. It's, and the other thing as well is it's all exactly the same level. You don't see that in most structures, you know. It just doesn't add up. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a break. We've done quite a bit so far. We've actually done quite a lot. So we're going to take a break. I'm going to we'll have 15 minutes, and we'll stop that. And I don't know. Hang on, where's Roger gone? Right, I don't know why Roger and David have come in so late today. Naughty boys, right? Naughty.
Internet.
I'm just going to mention. I'm just going to thank everybody for renewing for the next 2 months of classes. So obviously those it's renewal time, guys. So if you can start, those that haven't renewed for their classes, you will know from the email. It went up £2. It's £50 now for 2 months. So if you can get that over to us, that would be absolutely great. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break now, and we'll go from there. We'll speak to you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
And Roger, you can't go.
I just come.
Yeah,
Internet.
Pain in the arse.
Internet problem. Or lack of. All the well.
Right, I'll go and put the kettle on.
Can't feed the dog. Mm-hmm. Yes. Doggy nice. Oh. Oh.
Trina's gone all stripey.
Not been well.
Touch of the zebras.
Very fetching. It's funny, I've been trying to take pictures of people like that for years and it's never kind of come out right, and yet that looks quite good. Yeah. I came across something new the other day, that a field of archaeology I'd never heard of. I actually had to look it up. Skyscape archaeology.
Give over.
No, and I thought, what the hell's that? Do they mean skyscrapers or sky? And it's actually the sky, how the sky affects cultures, whether it's, you know, stars or sun alignments or clouds or whatever. But it's just, I thought, well, it's no reason why you shouldn't, because it does seem to have, you know, obviously agriculturally affects everybody all the time. But,
Yeah.
but I'd never heard of it before.
I've never heard that.
It was a course, so it must be proper.
You know, we discovered that Tony's great-grandfather, he lived in a large hall in Northamptonshire, Lilford Hall, and he was the carpenter.
Right.
And he'd made all the wooden pews for the local chapel.
Oh, wow.
So we went to have a look, and they said, oh, all the people from the hall, the serfs had to go in through the back entrance. They were not allowed to go through the main entrance of the chapel.
Yeah.
All the serfs went through the back and stayed at the back, and the gentry went through the main entrance and stayed at the front.
Yeah, that'd be about right.
Yeah.
You can make it all, but you can't sit in it.
Isn't that shocking?
Welcome to the real world. Yeah.
But when you look around, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of churches and chapels. Every little village, every hamlet had one.
Yeah.
A lot of them are converted into nice houses now, aren't
Yeah,
they?
well, there'll be a lot more in the near future as well, because they're just not sustainable anymore. Nobody uses them.
The village I was born in had 13 chapels and a church.
Wow, that's
And
a
it was only a
lot.
village.
Yeah, yeah, we have what, 3?
What have we got here? We've got the Methodist.
The Methodist, yeah, C of E, and the
Church.
Catholic, yeah.
and
I
Church
mean, the
of
Wesleyans and the Brynites.
Ooh,
And
right.
the two shall never meet.
No, yeah, don't get in the wrong. Yeah, walk
Have
on
we
the other
got a
side of the
Quaker
road.
meeting house?
And there would be a festival, St. Peter's Tide.
Yeah.
And the Wesleyans, they had their St. Peter's Tide on the Saturday, and the Brynites on the Sunday. And if you were a Brynite, you weren't allowed to run in the Wesleyan races.
Yeah. Oh, dearie me. So
Yeah.
silly, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. No, we don't have a meeting house. No.
That we don't have a Quaker meeting house.
No, I'm not sure where the nearest one is.
There's there was one in Ambleside. There isn't anymore. No, I don't.
Christadelphians were a very serious bunch. Their children weren't allowed to go to the cinema or to read books or to do anything like that.
Yeah, I
listen to
had an
music.
aunt who was one of them.
Yeah.
And at her funeral, God, the minister or whatever he's called, fire and brimstone. He was shouting from the
absolutely,
pulpit,
yeah.
and you're thinking, what? And my dad's giggling away because he knew it was going to annoy me. He said, "Thought you'd like that," and I thought, "Yeah." I thought, "Hang on, how can you interpret the Bible in that way? You know, you can live in fear." Oh, awful.
There was an uncle of mine which established the Christadelphians in Port Lebanon, Uncle Walter, and of course his family were all avid Christadelphians, and they were really stuck to it. They did nothing on a Sunday at all.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely nothing. You know, they went to chapel and that was about it.
Yeah.
Well, we had to go to Sunday school every week. My brother and I, all dressed up in our best clothes, and me with a big straw hat on.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah.
That was the Methodist one. But,
The Methodist.
I
used
went, but it was
enjoy
only to
it,
chase the
actually.
girls.
Good fun.
yeah, it was. I enjoyed it. The Sunday school too. It's good.
Yeah.
But we used to have socials and things.
Yeah.
And if you hadn't gone to the Sunday school, you couldn't go to the social. So
Oh yeah, you see, that's how they do it, isn't it? You know.
yeah, that's how they do it. That's
If
right,
you want to
yeah.
get married in the church, you've got to come for 3 months or 3 years.
Something
Or
like
whatever.
that, yeah.
3 years.
Why? Well, why do we have to pay for it then? Unless you go to Scotland, where it's different.
Mm. Is it? What is it in Scotland?
Scotland, the minister is registered, not the place. So you can
Oh,
get married
really?
wherever you like.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. We found a very nice minister and then a really nice castle.
Oh, lovely.
That's why the blacksmith forge in.
Yep, that's right.
Green.
Gretna.
Yep, that's it. That was available. Yeah.
Yeah, Karen's
I
sister
wonder-
got married there.
Is it 16? Can you marry there when you're 16?
I don't know. I don't know actually what the law is up there. It is you can get married in this country with 16 with your parents' permission.
Oh, can you?
So yeah, but I don't know whether it is the same in Scotland. But you could just lie. You elope to Gretna, don't you?
That's right. Yes, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
You'd really have to be in love to do that because it's not exactly the prettiest of towns.
It's really not, is it?
No, and
No,
you're thinking
no.
you've got to be desperate to do this, you know. But that's what love. It's kind of nice to think that real, true love has
It's a
motivated so
romantic
many
notion.
people to do that. Yeah,
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
yeah. Be kind of interesting to try and do a follow up. I don't know whether anyone has to see how well any of them lasted.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
The church we got married in, my mother-in-law was the caretaker.
Right.
So that's why we had to use that church.
Yeah. If my grandfather had been alive, he would have had to marry because he was a minister, but he long gone by then. He christened me, which was nice.
Oh.
Yeah, I was
Well,
his
I
first
Go
first
on.
grandson as well, and born on Easter Sunday, which must have been impressive.
I was never
She was the
christened.
caretaker.
Yeah.
And on one occasion, I was home on leave. And they were having a funeral, but the funeral had paid for the bell.
Right.
But the bell rope snapped on the first.
Oh dear. Yeah,
a
one
couple
dong's
of
not
days
enough.
previously.
Yeah.
And so the reverend came to the mother-in-law and said, "Is there anything you could do with the rope?" She said, "Oh, I can't do anything with the rope." "Well, Peter, can you do anything?"
Yeah.
So I went down there. I went up into the belfry and said, "Well, the rope's as rotten as a pear. You can't do anything with the rope."
Yeah.
"Can you ring the bell?" he said. I said, "Well, I could ring the bell by hand." He said, "Well, can you do it for the funeral?" He said, "If you look out through the window, when I give you the thumbs up,
Yeah.
start to ring the bell." So I'm
Yeah.
like Quasimodo at
Yeah.
the bell tower, actually ringing the bell. So
God.
I've done me Quasimodo bit.
Yeah. Hey, you'll be able to put a claim in for the church if you're going deaf now.
Well, I could do, yeah.
Yeah. Industrial injury.
What was that comedy show where it showed the monks ringing
Yes.
the bells and they were going up
All
in the air?
all gas and gaiters.
Is that what it was?
Was it where Derek Nimmo and a few of the
Oh, yes.
wasn't that the one where they were all going around?
Well, they were just going up in the air, the monks, with
Yeah.
pulling the ropes, and they couldn't keep themselves on the ground. And they
Yeah.
were going up. I thought it was Monty Python.
Well, it might be. Well, it might. Monty Python certainly did
Something
it as well.
silly.
Yeah. Yeah. Silly. Yeah, I've never tried bell ringing.
Is it Campanile?
That's the only time I ever tried.
Yeah.
It's quite skillful, I believe, isn't it?
Yes, but it's all in the timing, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
Apparently, yeah. That's why I got the clock with the Westminster chimes that you've just heard.
Yeah.
Oh.
Aye. That's more than Westminster does at the moment, isn't it? So
It certainly is, yep. I usually mute it when that comes on, but it was too late.
No, it's fine. It's kind of nice to hear.
Well, he wasn't talking anyway, so.
No.
Your stripes have all gone, Drina.
Where is Drina?
Taking the medicine. Aye.
I wonder how far parish registers go back.
That's a good question, actually.
Been looking on, that DNA,
Yeah.
ancestry DNA. Every so often I get updates on the internet saying we have found another match.
Right.
And
15 times removed. Yeah.
no, these are second
close.
cousins. One of them I do know about.
All right.
A new one has cropped up, but I can have a look. I can actually do a family tree on it. It links you to the census.
Right.
And I've got back to the early 1800s.
Good.
And then I think we go into Scotland, which is a whole different thing.
What was your maiden name, Margaret?
My maiden name was Armstrong.
Oh, well, there you go. That goes with that.
So,
that's one of the biggest Border Reaver families going.
I know.
Right, bad lot.
Yeah. Well, where have I got? I've got back to my.
They were on the English. Were they on the English side, the Armstrongs? I can't remember of the border. I can't remember exactly.
Well,
where
they were. No, they were Scots.
Oh, the other Scottish side, yeah.
Just over the border. They were Liddesdale.
Right. Yeah.
And over towards Newcastle way, because if you go to Newcastle and Bamborough, it's full of Armstrongs. They're everywhere like a rash.
Well, what's it? House. Oh God, it's a National Trust property over there in Northumberland, which is brilliant. It had the first electric light in the country, and it had a hydraulic lift. It was designed by Armstrong. It was but he was an arms manufacturer in Newcastle, at Cragside. Really beautiful. It's got an oriental garden. It's a beautiful, beautiful house in lovely gardens. Well worth a visit.
Yeah.
But
Bamborough Castle he's Armstrong, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You should go and visit your relatives.
I've been there. I've been to Bamborough Castle.
Right. Oh, I've not been.
And they've got a really good museum there. Because we had a good engineering side. Well, there's Armstrong Sidley, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Yeah.
The lady I used to know in London, her husband was an Armstrong.
There's a lot of. Well, we've been on the moon. We've been everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Still going out taking land that don't belong to you. Desi, coming from another Border Reaver family, did just the same thing, but we didn't go to the moon, I don't think. So, I think there's more of you than there is of the Pringles. So.
I think, yeah. Well, they've traced the Armstrongs back to one single Pictish man.
Really?
They said all the Armstrong males have got that same. They can trace it back to this one particular man.
Was he called Dave?
It could well have been
Dave with the strong arms.
Dave with the strong. Yeah, no, we had this walk on Monday, right? And there was 10 of us on it, and everyone that we went past who was a bloke, we said, "Hi, John," right? And eventually somebody said, "Oh, how did you know my name?" I said, "I told you so."
Yeah.
And then we changed it to Dave, and we after a couple of Daves, "Oh yeah, how'd you know me?" "Yeah, see, told you."
Not one single Brian was born in Britain last year.
What, Brian of Nazareth?
No Brians.
No Bryans.
That's my second name, Brian.
Oh, was it Roderick?
Yes, Roderick.
Roderick.
He has a wife, you know.
She's called Intercontinentia Buttocks.
My Brian with a Y.
Oh, well, you have to be different than you.
That'd be a Celtic spelling, is it?
Of course you would, yeah.
I gotta be sorry to interrupt your wonderful talk about the Armstrongs, but we had this guy in the Lanford Major class, right? And well, I'm gonna have to give his name, but he's called Alan, right? And I couldn't really work out why he always got upset when he used to have letters off us. So every single letter that we sent out had a different spelling of Alan, right? And then when he used to write, he wrote us a letter once. He wrote us a single letter, a stamp on it saying, "Why do you always get my name wrong? It's A," and he spells it out. And then the penny doesn't drop then, and I spell it by some other way. It's funny. Anyway, let's crack on, folks. Let's crack on. So, right, and yeah, I was going to mention, when I was mentioning about the renewing of the classes thingamajig, I do believe that Roger and David has to send a cheque, so it's the usual address, David and Roger, okay? And it's a shame you're not. What's that, Dave?
How much is it, Dick?
£164.
Right.
No, we decided to make it a round figure because lots of people were paying 50 instead of the 48, so it's £50.
Right, thank you.
So, well,
Too
actually,
bad I've done you for £2 then.
oh yeah, I'm going to send you a PayPal bill. Pete.
What?
Hey, Roger, you're going to love this, right? You're going to love this.
I got my book.
On the walk on Friday, right? On Monday, Bill stopped and started talking to somebody, right? And I could clearly see that these people did not want him talking to them about a well, right? And he was saying, "This well's really important, isn't it?" And the guys were going, and I just thought I'd just leave him there. I thought it was quite funny.
Oh yeah, right. I thought it'd be on someone else's phone. I thought that would be it.
Yeah, that was even worse. Right. Anyway, let's get back to it again. So it's that time of day again that is trying to get back into that rhythm, and we've had a nice break. And going back to what I said at the beginning, the two lines of inquiry was what happened to all the monks and monasteries when the Normans invaded Britain and then eventually came into Wales. Is the answer that there was a mass annihilation of the monks? Was Christianity as heightened as the historians tell us? Did people actually have the levels of religion that history tells us? Because the archaeological evidence doesn't paint that way. So we started to develop this, and we've started to see that there's problems with the archaeology and how it's being interpreted. Now, this site here is a rather interesting site. I know it well. It's one of my regular haunts. It's a place that I'll be doing a ghost walk on Friday, and it's a place that I tell about things that go bump in the night, and I say about it's a very large it's a very large defended site, and the towers don't look like they're part of a monastery, and I tell them all these things and ghosts and various other things. But that's not the talk that I want to that's not the talk that I want to do. What I want to do is we've got this wall. It doesn't look like a monastic wall, but that's again another lecture. What I need to do is go back. I need to go away from that point. I need to go before the Normans. This is where I need to be. I don't want to do this one. I need to go before the Normans. And one intriguing thing about this site is something in the footnotes. And what is in the footnotes is this: Eweny Priory founded as a cell of St. Peter's, Gloucester by William of London, Lord of Ogmore Castle. Yeah, fair enough. Right, yeah. It's a huge site, and there was like 8 monks there, 2 heavily defended gateways. That's something else. And this is the line here that really intrigues me. The recovery of pre-Norman stones on the site suggest that there may have been a much earlier foundation at Eweny. Right, now those words interest me more than anything, and I did actually have a map showing you where this was. Okay, we'll go with this. We'll go with this map, right? So if we point on here where Ueni is, for everybody who doesn't know, Ueni is a rather interesting site, which is by there. Sorry about the other arrow. It's by there, and it's a place. It's near a place called Bridgend, Ogmore, and the site itself is steeped with lots of interesting things. But one thing that really interests me is that little footnote: earlier pre-Norman stones. That's all I've got. I've got no other information than that, and it makes me think about an early origin for this site, well before the Normans. And it also makes me wonder, were those pre-Norman stones religious? If they were religious, what was the monastic order that was here before the French orders that were imposed upon us by the Normans? Who were these people? And nobody is discussing it. That's the thing, nobody is discussing it. And this is why I wanted to sort of ask these very pertinent questions. And I just think that we focus so much on what we can see rather than things that have been excavated and found and have just been placed into drawers. Now, I am really pleased to say that my relationship with the National Museum of Wales has improved no end. They're even selling my new book. And when they lift the current embargo on visiting the museum and the archives, I'm going to ask to see these pre-Norman stones. I'm going to look at them and I'm going to see what I'm going to try and understand what these pre-Norman stones mean. Do they help me understand whether there was a great monastery here before the Normans? Were these stones associated with something else? Right? Do they tell us about early Christianity, or do they tell us about something else? I need to know those answers, and hopefully maybe this time next year I will have those answers. Now, where I'd like to go next, as we've done today, we've darted in and out of looking at different localities, right? So I'm just going to crack on with where I want to be, and I've got to do that. It's a massive site, and this is another thing. Anything to do with these early monasteries, it's always a footnote, right? People always say, "Oh, there's an early church there," but they don't actually show us anything, you know. Now this is a site that breaks the mold. Andy, where is this? Come on, we've done this a few times before. Can you tell me, Andy? No.
Somewhere in the Cotswolds.
No. Yeah, it's like that type of architecture. No, it's not. It's actually a really good try, Pete, because it's got a similar colour stone. But it's the type of stone that would be used to build Roman structures. This is Brixworth Church, Northamptonshire.
Oh.
Yes. Yes. Now I could do a whole lecture on this for 3 hours, right? And I can't do that now, but Andy's listened to my talks about Brixworth years ago, and I can remember showing an image of all the stonework that was used at Brixworth from Roman buildings, right? Now this is really interesting, right? Now there's Brixworth on the plan. There it is. Not too far away from the Cotswolds, Pete. Oh, and by the way, there's the map of where Ueni was. Right, we'll just point this out. Sorry, it's in the wrong order. We'll get to Brixworth quickly. Hang on, mate. Let's just chuck in this, right? That is basically Bridgend from the earlier, and there is in fact Ueni. So you know where it is now, on the South Wales coast. But that is in fact the previous site that we were looking at. That was Ueni. But now I want to go to Brixworth. Now, Brixworth is an absolutely amazing site, and the reason why it's amazing is that, back to what I've already said, they've got building stone and brick used at Brixworth from a number of Roman sites. Now, okay, just make sense of this, please. What does this mean? What happened was that when they were building this really big sort of pre-Anglo-Saxon, then Anglo-Saxon church. They took building material from different localities. So basically, that community down the road, a mile away, brings a load of material for the construction of this church, right? The community south of there, 2 miles away, brings a load of material, and the material lying around is material from Roman buildings, right? So all of this material's basically, this is a Minster church. This is a home church, right? This is the church. And what you can clearly see there is the early archaeology, and it's saying from the 680s. I say before that, much earlier, from the 680s itself. That's the early church. What you're actually seeing, is that if we go back again, hang on a minute, my slides have gone all nuts. What we're seeing is all this stuff here, all this central nave stuff, is all part of the original Minster Church of Brixworth, right? But we don't really know. We've got a church standing, right? It's pre-Norman. It's pre-Norman by quite some years. Yeah, it's mentioned in the Peterborough Chronicle, right? The Peterborough Chronicle records Brixworth as having a monastery. It's got a monastery, and it was founded by Sexulf, Bishop of Mercia. Sexulf was this great famous Bishop of Mercia, sometime before the 670s, right? So there was a great monastery abbey constructed here, probably an earlier church here before the Anglo-Saxons, right? But it was founded. We know it's about Sexulf, right? But you know what? I don't, for the life of me, know the name of the monastic order that was here. I don't know the name of it. I'm looking through my notes saying what's the name of this monastic order? What is it? What's the name of the monastic? I don't know what it is, right? But we know that there was a monastery here. So where's the data for these monks? It's gone. It's no longer with us. But interesting. I know I get really excited now, but this is the crux of this, right? What we do, we got a Minster church, we got a highly important church. Where are the records about who these monks were? What happened to these monks? Where did they go? Now, this is the thing. Where did these monks go? What happened to them? Because then we look at Winchester. We're going to quickly go down to Winchester in a few moments. We'll look at Winchester. Now, I know what happened at Winchester. Now, I do know a little bit more about what happened at Winchester. Winchester's got a little bit more of a story about Brixworth. Just sort of talking about the architecture a little bit. Loads of Roman materials used in it. It's a precedent for an early Christian church in Britain, stone-built church. Right, we got one wooden church still standing in East Anglia, but all the other churches are of stone construction. The ones that actually survive. But then all the other evidence. What they found is that the walls that you're actually seeing are actually the Anglo-Saxon walls. There was a bigger church put up around it, right? But that bigger church itself is undoubtedly no longer with us today. So I got really excited about this, and I thought, right, we're going to get to the monks, and I haven't got to them. It's not here. It's not in front of me. It's gone. But we've got the archaeology. What is going on? Is this some kind of conspiracy? Am I talking? What am I looking at? I'm not saying anything really. But what I would like to do now, I would like to now look at Winchester. It's another major site at Winchester that we never ever look at, right? So where is Winchester? It's a really obscure place. I'd love to go there. I've never been there. There's Roman archaeology. But before we go to Winchester quickly, this is all Roman building material, Roman tiles used in one of the arches at Brixworth Church. So most of the church is built out of Roman building material. And you don't see that it's basically all built with Roman building material. And what does that tell us, right? Surely if you're taking building material from a ruined Roman villa, it's pagan, or is it Christian? What does that mean? It's all taken to the Minster Church. They revere this church. What does all that mean? But what all this means is gone, because we don't have the records to tell us anything more other than what's written in the Peterborough Chronicles, which is very, very limited. What is going on? Again, we're not going to get that answer. So what we got Winchester there. There is our lovely little Winchester, right? Key places in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle along the Old Way. So you've got these key places. Peterborough. Where's Brixworth? Oh, it's not there. Is it there? No, it's not there. Because obviously that's the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. These are the places in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which are a completely different document altogether. So, what's going on there? So, now, what were you going to say, Roger? You just mentioned something.
I was saying he's got an accent, isn't he? That's a Norman soldier, is it?
Well, unfortunately, whoever drew this didn't know what they were doing, because this is not Anglo-Saxon stuff. The headgear is not right. Whoever's done this, Rico, you are dead right. So martyrdom of the martyrdom of Leithfieth of Canterbury, Anglo-Saxon Bishop of Winchester. So this is a thing. This is rather interesting. This is the Anglo-Saxons. What's going on here? So I wanted to put this in here to sort of get your mind working about the violence of the times. Just get your mind working. And Andy, do you know we said that earlier on about the previous site at Lindisfarne, which was contemporary with the 600s, 700s, 800s, but we said it looked like outlines. This is the outlines of the church at Winchester, right? So the Winchester, the Old Minster, the Anglo-Saxon Cathedral, the Diocese of Wessex, and then Winchester from 660 to 1093. It stood on a site immediately north and partially beneath its successor, Winchester Cathedral. Now we know a lot more about this site. We know it was constructed for King Kenneth of Wessex in 648. It's mentioned in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. This is rather interesting. By the 900s, the Minster was the priory church of St. Swithin's Priory, a community of monks living under the rule of St. Benedict. Now, this brings me in with another problem, a very serious problem. St. Benedict, the rule of St. Benedict is obviously a French order. And it does bid the question. That's a rather interesting point. It does bid the question. Did all of those orders from France come over with the Normans, or did some of them come over before? That is a really interesting question, but we will leave that bit for another day. But it's a rather interesting question. It does actually bid the question again. It doesn't answer what I'm trying to ask. I'm asking, what about all the other British orders? Because the British, I'm going to say it, the Celtic Church was very different from the Church of Rome. Very, very different. The native British Christian Church was very different from the orders associated with the Church of Rome. Now, I've mentioned this before. I've mentioned a very, very important point. I use these two terminologies. There's the Roman Church, which is the church that was established by the Romans in Britain whilst they ruled over Britain in the late 300s and 400s. And there's so that's the Roman Church, and then there's the Church of Rome. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So basically, it's the Church at Rome, the Vatican and all the rest of it. That's very different from the church that was established by the Romans when they were actually here. That's what I'm trying to trace, and I'm finding dead ends absolutely everywhere. And the one thing that we do see about Winchester is that it's something rather strange, right? Rather strange. if this is the by the 900s, the Minster was the priory church of St. Swithin's Priory, a community of monks living under the rule of St. Benedict. Okay, let's believe that. Let's just not say that that's a bit of a history invented. We'll just go with that. That's fine. But then the strangest thing, a Norman order, which is St. Benedict's, right? Then the Normans come to the site of Winchester, and they demolish the whole minster down. They demolish it all, and they build a new minster. It doesn't make sense, and that was done in 1093. I've always said that doesn't make sense. I know some of the archaeologists who were actually excavating here in the 1960s, and what you can see is the outline of the building is now laid out in brickwork in the churchyard adjoining Winchester Cathedral. The other massive thing is that many of the kings of Wessex and of England, including King Egbert, King of Wessex from 802 until his death in 839, lots of bishops were interred in the old Minster, and it's just I struggle with I really struggle with this question. I really struggle with the question: why did the Normans demolish this church, the Minster, if it was already associated with a Norman order? So that's another problem I've got. Something else that is not ringing true. Right, anyway, let's just try and finish with these images, right? So again, this is the old Minster, and there's the new Minster alongside, and it's a very strange shaped church. And doesn't that look very similar to the church at Brixworth? It does look very similar to Brixworth Church. If we actually go back and we actually look at that, and we chuck that directly onto the Minster Church at Winchester, and they look very similar. So the thing is, pre-Norman churches look very different from Norman churches.
Yeah, because that's following a Byzantine pattern, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, exactly. A different form of Christianity. Do you know what? You're right, guys. Do you know one thing that we always talk about? We always talk about Catholicism and Protestantism, and we always talk about the dissolution of the monasteries, which I'm one of the very few archaeologists in this country who actually agrees with the dissolution of the monasteries for what the monasteries actually stood for. And the fact of the matter is, we always talk about Protestantism and we always talk about Catholicism and the differences, but we don't talk about this period. Why don't we talk about this period? Why? And do you know what? I know this sounds quite patriotic and stuff and whatever, but this might interest Roger in particularly. Roger, did you know there was a full-scale rebellion in Wales in 1532?
No.
Nor did I until yesterday.
No. I was a bit late, I thought, by then. After
Exactly. I didn't know that either.
Any big reaction, anyway.
It was a fairly big rebellion. It was going to be another independence rebellion, Roger. But anyway, that's something else.
But that was such a big one, because the trouble was getting the sort of Princeton or tribes together.
Exactly. But the main thing I'm trying to talk about, Roger, is that there's so many things that we're not told and taught. But anyway, this is quickly looking at Winchester. This is quickly looking at Winchester, and the last site, Place de Resistance. Two sites I want to look at now before we finish. We're actually in Cumbria. We're at Brigham Church. Right, and the reason why I wanted to mention Brigham Church right at the end, so I've kept you guys interested in Cumbria. So we've got Brigham Church. Now, I'd just like to mention something about Brigham Church. I don't know if you guys have been there. I haven't actually been there. Brigham Church is associated with St. Bridget. And it's believed to be an early centre of Christianity in Cumbria. And the Church of St. Bridget's at Brigham, the building that you can see there today is of Norman build. But there's something that this has got in common with UNE. and is situated at the far north of the village known as Low Brigham. It contains several fragments of pre-Norman crosses and other early carved stones. And that is the link. And the point is, why are we not told more about what's going on? And it's everywhere. When for example we looked at the period of the period between 420s, 476 all the way to the Norman period, we're told that nothing much happened, when in fact there's so much information that's screaming out to tell us wonderful things about our past. The Dark Ages was not dark at all. It was illuminated. There's so much that we need to learn, and there's so much of those voices across the whole of Britain that can speak to us. And Brigham, and I tell you what, I want one of you guys in Cumbria, right, to try and track down some of these crosses, right? I want you to learn what you can from them. And maybe in about a year's time, we'll come together and we'll say, right, what have you learned and what have I learned from these stone carvings, if they're crosses or not, I don't know, which are found in the National Museum of Wales. Let's actually come back at that, and that's a bit of a challenge for about a year's time. So you've got a whole year to look at that. And finally today, I want us to there's Brigham Church. It does look really, that big fat heavy tower, which would have been built in about the 1400s, but the rest of the church is a lot earlier, as we said. And obviously the early foundations pre-Norman. I want to know more about that. So, and finally folks, finally at the end, in many ways today is an amalgam of questions that I had from a few weeks ago, this talk that I gave to a group on Saturday, and somebody said they weren't listening to this presentation, they were listening to my book, and I went off into this sort of tangent as in bits of it we've done today, and they basically said okay then, we've listened to what you've got to say, we've really enjoyed what you've got to say. And they said, well, what about Christian sites that have got earlier evidence? No, not Christian, not early Christianity, pre-Christian, right? What can you tell us about what can you tell us about Druids and pagans and stuff? Well, where's the evidence for that? And I didn't go down the usual channel. I said, that's the answer. The yew tree. Up in North Wales, there's a yew tree in a church graveyard at Langenoi. I've pronounced that wrong. My Welsh teeth are not in. But the fact of the matter is, at that locality, along with a few other churches, Nevin being another one in West Wales, few other churches in Wales, we've got these really old yew trees in the church graveyard. And some of these yew trees, like the Fotheringay yew tree in Scotland, which is 3,000 years old, 1,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. This one as well is a tree that's being planted or has grown in a locality well before Christianity. But Christianity is still there in one form or another. The point that I was trying to make was that you can see signs of earlier religions and you can see signs of early Christianity if you really look, and you really try, like at Brigham and with the stones and like the example at Uani, and then you can see old yew trees. All of this adds up to something, and it adds up to a far more powerful image that we have of Britain between 400 and 1066 than we could have ever have dreamt of. And in closing today, I would say that when my history teacher said that nobody lived in Wales between 400 and 1066 because we don't have any evidence, he was an absolute liar. And I believe that for so many years, and so many other people have as well. We're not taught our real history, and this is exactly what I've done today. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to mention what we're going to do next week, and then we're going to ask. If there's any questions. So I'm just going to double check what we're doing next week because it is on a post-it in my diary. We're going to be looking at the moche culture of South America next week. So, the mocha culture, or it's a coffee culture, or whatever they call themselves. M-O-C-H-E, the mocha, choca mocha. That's what we're doing next week. So what we're going to do is, are there any questions, folks? Pete just shrivels his nose like a little mouse.
What about?
You didn't mention the yew tree in the church at Sully Church, the bleeding yew tree.
That's the one at Nevern, Pete, as well.
Is it? Oh, all right then.
That's the one. I did mention the one at Nevern, but I'm not really sure. The nice, really big one by the tower at Sully Church. That's really cute. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a really nice tree. So all of these trees, all of these early signs of something, people's connections that we don't really talk about, and this is exactly what we've been talking about today. Right. Thanks for that, Pete. What about you, Blondie?
Is that me?
Yeah.
Or Andy?
No, you're Blondie. Just insulted Andy now.
Are yew trees only ever planted on consecrated ground?
No, but they seem to be right. Okay, there's an
the cattle out.
Yes,
Is that what it was?
Yeah,
that's one of
the cattle.
That's one of
I
many
didn't know
reasons.
that.
Basically, you find loads of yew trees associated with churches because they're revered
yeah.
and cherished. You don't find yew trees dotted around the countryside because they've been cut down, right?
Ah.
Because they're in church graveyards, they are protected, right?
Oh,
So the reason why you find them in church graveyard is that very reason, and they're to ward off evil. They're to do with early religious practices or early something. If we take the religious word away, they can ward off cattle, all sorts of different things.
They're linked to superstition.
Yes,
Oh,
and
right.
don't whatever you do, go into a church graveyard and run up to the yew tree and say, "Oh, look at all these lovely little berries." I was in a church graveyard with several individuals one day, and there was this numpty with us, and he ran up, and there was some others with him. Right, he ran up to the yew tree. He started putting the berries in his mouth, and he said, "Oh, you can eat the skin of the berries, but the pip is dangerous." Right.
Yeah.
So he was handing them out to whoever he was with, and and one of them bit into this thing, and he said, no, you're supposed to only eat the skin. And I thought, you absolute idiot, right? Because they are poisonous. If you have 10 of those pips, it'll kill you.
Yeah. The other bit is supposed to be very nice, but I've never dared try it. I have to admit.
No, leave it alone.
Yeah.
Leave it alone, yeah.
They used to use. There's the archery connection as well, isn't there? So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Um.
Good for the
Oh, the bows. They make the bows from the yew tree. Yeah.
Yeah, and you had to practice on Sundays. So.
Yes. Yes.
What about Saint Augustine?
The visit of
yes.
Saint Augustine in the 500s.
Yeah.
Now that is a very interesting one because
Yeah.
Saint Augustine is actually coming over on behalf of the church in Rome,
Yeah.
right? Germanus in the 440s is still a representative of Roman civilization. He's over here to restore the Roman church.
Yeah.
But again, the Roman church is in the Roman civilization church. But then you've got St. Augustine coming over in the 500s, and then he's now introducing the new Roman church from Rome itself.
Yeah. So
there's this prevalence of something that we're not getting. Right, and this is what I wanted to do is to put to get your minds thinking today. I don't want to I wanted to get your minds thinking. Right, we had so much today of whether this was right or that was right, but I wanted to get your minds thinking, and hopefully I've achieved that today. Anything else you'd like to say, Andy?
Oh, it's just because I read something a while ago about St. Augustine and why he was sent over here, because we had two distinct Christian camps here. One was kind of loosely Irish, which was a beautiful blend of mythology and paganism and Christianity, which is where a lot of the beautiful artwork and illustrations came from. And also the kind of main sort of English one, which was slightly different, and that the Roman Catholic Church, as he was representing, didn't like that because we weren't towing the line, so he was sent over to readdress it. And I wondered if that was what happened, and that the monks became amalgamated into it. Like they have when we've changed religion before. You are told that you will be this religion, or you be, executed. So, but I have no evidence of that because, like you said, it just suddenly disappeared. And maybe there weren't, maybe there weren't orders before that, and the Normans developed the orders. Maybe it was just individual groups prior to that.
And this again is the question I was asking. Is this
the records have gone? Yeah.
Yeah. Is this the massive? The thing is, what we do see, right?
Yeah.
Me and Roger and have been brought up with the St. Ilkdid, St. Barak, Caddock and Dublin, right? You know, even in school you'd have houses that and that's what we were told, and it was all based around those four saints. The whole of our history, chuck in St. David there as well. It was all based around those four saints. But what I'm trying to say is, that idea of those four saints is coming down from the Normans. We might have one or two carved stones that say Ilkdid on them, right? But the fact of the matter is, it's almost as if we're given a sanitized history, not this history that is actually the real history.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I mean, Christianity's got a history of doing that, hasn't it?
Yes.
Right from the word go.
And to be honest with you, Margaret, in 400 AD, you could have been a priest.
I tell you what was interesting also is that in that recent exhibition of the Anglo-Saxon literature at the British Museum, there were all sorts of books, but there was nothing that I saw there about anything other than what we would recognize as Christianity. No other previous ones at all. And there were a lot of unusual books there, and a lot of references to all sorts of other things, which would tend to suggest that there wasn't much, rather than it been all, because they wouldn't have got rid of all of it. They couldn't have done. So,
isn't most of the written work in Ireland?
The Book of Kells and all the rest of it. The thing is, that is the point. The point is that when you look at Ireland as an example, Irish Christianity is the same as our Christianity, except our form of what the Irish Christianity had, it disappeared completely. And Pete hasn't said it, but I'll say it for him. If you wander around Cornwall, right, at one stage there would have been hundreds, if not thousands, of little stone crosses on the sides of the roads. There's hundreds of them still there, right? But what the hell? What's all that about? It's not actually. It's not. It's very different. It's massively different from what we find elsewhere in Britain. And actually, the other point I was going to make, but I didn't need to make it, right, was that in Wales you've got all these stones, right, carved stones everywhere. You've got a lot more in Cornwall, but you've got lots in West Wales, right? And the point is it's very different than anything else, but it doesn't link with anything. Me and Pete can go down the road in Cornwall, and it's a really, really nice walk. You can see a roadside cross. We can say, this is a really nice roadside cross. It means this and that. But when you look at the way Catholicism comes to us in the way of all their orders after the Norman period, it doesn't make sense. Pete's lovely Cornwall. It's very different Christianity. It's nicer and pleasant, but it's not like that elsewhere, and this is what I don't get. Right, so
was it called Columba? Columba that came over from Ireland and set
Yeah.
up a monastery on Iona.
Up
Yeah.
north, yeah, that was
Yeah,
different as
he
well.
influenced a lot of Scotland and northern England, but I don't know that he influenced any further south, did he?
No, he didn't. Basically they built. The strange thing was, this is one thing I remember years ago. Colombo introduced wooden churches, and Augustine introduced stone churches, something like that. Because if you look at the Anglo-Saxon, most of them actually made of stone, and then the wooden churches introduced from Ireland. There's all these weird little anomalies.
Yeah, but it's still history written by the winners, isn't it? And then
Yes, it
Columba is, he's Catholic again. So
Yeah, exactly, and all would have been destroyed. Right, okay. Final questions. I think Jessica's got something she wants to show us, but quickly, yes. So
Yeah.
if Roger doesn't want to, if Roger hasn't got anything else, have you got anything else you'd like to say, David?
No, I've
Thank
got
you.
it.
No.
I'll sign off now. I'll see you tomorrow.
And you're going to see the images that Jessica wants to show you.
What is it though?
Oh, go on, Jessica. How many have you got to show us? Can you do it quick?
It's only a few ones. It's going to be like 2 seconds. I just wanted to sort of show how
Go for it.
depictions of Christ had changed. We've got a 2nd century Roman depiction, and Christ looks very muscular. His head's up, very different to what we see. And you see that over time it changes. And that's why I was trying to say maybe the religion over time, there's been more thought and meditation, because as you can see, Anglo-Saxon is a little bit more detail. And then you get to the gory part, they start to understand what death looks like, and they've really, really thought about it. And that's when the theology comes into it a little bit more, because people are thinking of the religion more. And I think I think the early Christianity is not as big as we thought. It's the beginnings of something that's going to develop to something much more detailed.
And completely changed with the influence of a new authority. And then one final point I'd like to make before we all go, just 2 points really. The first thing is that I have completely done nothing in regards to how Christianity developed in Scotland. It's almost as if 1 minute you've got the Picts, and the next minute the Picts absorb Christianity like a sponge. It's great. And then finally, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining us today, and hopefully see you all next Tuesday. So if there's no other questions, we'll see you all next Tuesday. And everyone wants to chat to stay on at the end they can.
Tomorrow.
Oh well, hang on, Roger. Right, Arnside, I'll be seeing next Tuesday. You, Roger, I'll be seeing tomorrow.
Yeah. +1. Yeah.
At past 1. So if nobody's got any other questions, if anyone wants to stay at the end, that's great. So thank you very much. Thank you, Roger. See you tomorrow. See you, Margaret, next week.
Take care.
David
everybody.
and Drina and Peter and Andy. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
Carl.
Bye.
Take care. Take care. My pleasure. There's the witch, Margaret. Oh, Jessica. Right. How are you?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm all right. Having a lot of sort of light bulb moments with a lot of things at the moment.
Yeah,
Being
and
quite creative.
yeah, this was one of them. So don't read this out. Oh, right. Hang on. Let's stop the recording. So stop the recording. Right. Thank whoever's out there and the Pope and Jesus, our age Christ. Good.